in December of 2020. Big Heavy World hosted Art Mosh, a 2-day virtual summit of presenters who gathered to help Vermont's creative community survive and recover from the economic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, discussing how they've been affected both financially and creatively. They also share their plans for post-COVID life as an inspiration to others. In this 4th episode of the 6-part series, we hear from Shawna Potter. Shawna is a lecturer, a writer, and a musician, and will discuss with us as we prepare to open up nightclubs, bars, etc., harassment and bullying. We at Big Heavy World, as citizens of the United States and the state of Vermont, would like to acknowledge that this meeting is being held on the occupied, unceded, and seized territory of the Abenaki people. And now please welcome Shawna Potter.
I am coming to you from so-called Baltimore, Maryland, which I want to acknowledge is actually Piscataway land. It's snowy outside. I'm very warm in this office, and I'm just very happy and honored that everyone that is here or watching made it through whatever kind of fatigue they are surviving right now to be here. I think that it is the best time and the worst time to think about what we want to bring to our spaces when we are able to gather again, to redefine safety, to redefine, our priorities. We've all been reprioritizing and thinking about what really matters to us and thinking about the world that we want to come to when this is a little bit more normal, when we get back to normal, right? Not that that will ever be, 100%, but, and so now really is the time to think about, okay, what does safety look like, in a holistic way? And I know that people are exhausted, and it's a big deal to attend a Zoom meeting that isn't mandatory in the first place. But we got to think about that before we all get together again. And it's almost too late. And we start, there's too much going on. There's too many shows to attend. We can't sit down and have a meeting. We're trying to go out every night and have a good time and make up for lost time, or we're working those shows and trying to make money. So let's think about it now. What does a safer space look like right now? I can't share my screen. No, I can. And I want to try, if that's all right. I just have a couple slides I'd like to show you. Okay, so you see my screen, yeah? Cool. I just want to acknowledge a couple things. So first, I just want to talk, what is a safer space? What am I talking about? My specialty is training venues, virtually or in real life, in how to become a safer space and what to do and say in advance and in the moment when harassment happens. So what is a safer space? It doesn't mean that there aren't arguments. It doesn't mean that there aren't a difference of opinions. It doesn't mean that harassment or violence never happens. It just means that everyone there is invested in trying to reduce harassment and violence as much as possible. And it's a place where people feel free to express their full selves without the fear of violence. And so when and if harassment does happen, people know what to do or say that will help the situation and not accidentally make it worse, which is, it's possible if we don't know what we're doing. So how do we create a safer space? We need a few things. I'm just going to throw it all out there and you can read at your leisure. But we need a few things, and I don't have a lot of time. And obviously I wrote an entire book about all the things that you can do to create a safer space. And there is so much in here that I cannot say in 10 minutes. But I'm going to sum up a few things. So the first thing you need policies. You need to know what to do when something happens, and you need to know in advance. I think a lot of people call me to come in and train them to be a safer space in response to an incident happening, right? But let me tell you, it is so much less stressful to deal with harassment when you know how to deal with it when it comes up, right? And you're not scrambling to figure it out after the fact. So be proactive, get those policies in place. And there's a really, really great website that's new since I published my book, and it's on there, saferspaces.org.uk. This amazing group of researchers in the UK basically have a how to write your own safer space policy website. And it's a fantastic resource. Check it out. But you need to be posting about that, right? You need signs on the walls. You need signs on social media. You need to let people know what your policies are, what's important to you, what kind of vibe you're going for, who to talk to if you are harassed, what will happen if you harass someone. Like, you got to be fully transparent and clear about what behavior is expected in your space and what's going to happen if that's not followed. Another thing you need to do to make a safer space, and again, this might be a great time to think about this in advance before you're able to be at full capacity, is you have to hire and curate and book without bias, right? You have to be open to making sure that everyone that works in your space, that's on your stage, on the walls, whatever, reflects the actual community that you're in and gives voice to traditionally marginalized communities, right? So people need to look like the people that are going to be walking in your doors, right? People feel comfortable with people that look like them. And also, your staff needs to know what to do and say if someone's been harassed. And that goes back to policies and just practicing those conversations. Okay, what do you say if this? What do you say if that? I obviously go through all of that in here step by step. But just practice so it's a little less clunky, and make sure everybody knows what they're doing so everyone's on the same page. And then accessibility. It's huge, right? When I'm going to read this verbatim because I think it's that important. When you anticipate people's different needs, you anticipate different people. You let different folks know that you know they exist, right? And so therefore they are welcome and should be included and should feel free to come in your space and be able to be themselves and relax. So go the extra mile, put in whatever workarounds you can to make sure as many people as possible can come to your space and have a good time, right? Because that is what it's all about. To get into something a little more specific, there are ways that you can shut down harassment before it happens, right? So you want to catch potentially escalating harassment early and stop it before it starts, really, right? And so the first step to do that is just eavesdrop and observe, right? Think about this. Like, most of the people I work with represent a space in some way. They work there, they're a manager, they're the owner, they volunteer there, whatever. So they have some sort of authority. But even if you don't have authority, if you're just in the audience or if you're in a band, you're performing, you can always just observe what's going on. Take a moment, see if someone looks uncomfortable, right? If someone does look uncomfortable, you can interrupt whatever conversation is happening and make small talk. This is basically just distracting people. So that way, if someone is uncomfortable and they didn't know how to get out of that conversation before it got real bad, you're giving them a chance to get away. They might just walk away. If you do work somewhere, you might be able to separate two people. If you think that someone is kind of stuck being polite, dealing with this uncomfortable situation, they don't know how to get out of it without making it worse, which is a real thing. You can separate them by saying like, oh, hey, I had a problem with your card that I was running over here. Can we go check on it together? Right? Something like that. Or when someone inevitably goes to use the bathroom, you can ask the other person, hey, are you okay? Is everything all right? Do you need anything? And then you can always check in, follow up, and make your presence known. Sometimes just stepping near the person that's getting a little aggro is enough to remind them that there are other people around that can see what they're doing. And so they might want to watch their behavior, right? But really, the minimum, the bare minimum that you can always do is just check in with someone. Just say, hey, are you okay? Is that person bothering you? Do you know them? Are they cool? Like, keep it light. It's not a big deal. until they say it is. But just ask, like, are they okay? And okay, if anything comes up the rest of the night, I'll be over here. Just let me know. That's it. No big deal. Okay, so let's say I want to give you guys some more tips, like some real tips that you can use now in a pandemic, and also when things get back a little more normal. So there's the 5 Ds of bystander intervention. And what is this? All this is, it's a tool to help you shut down harassment and violence and make people feel more comfortable in the moment. It doesn't end every bit of violence, every ism in the world at once, right? Like, that's too much responsibility on your shoulders to end racism or transphobia forever. You know, that's not going to happen. All you're concentrating on as a bystander, someone who's seeing something unfold, your job is just to make this person that looks uncomfortable feel more comfortable, or to get them out of the situation, or interrupt the moment to give them a chance to get away. Just stop what's going on. And so there are several ways to do that, and you use the 5 Ds in order to do that. And you're going to pick the one that makes the most sense for just where you are, how much time you have, what kind of personality you have, right? Some of us are more in your face, fine with direct conflict. Some of us are not. Some of us are small and worried about our own safety. Some of us are a little bigger, or we look like the person that is harassing, and therefore we're not afraid of them, and we could, take on that conversation. Whatever situation you're in, one of the 5 Ds is going to work for you. So the first, and also I'll just tell our host, if a question comes up in the chat box, I can't see it right now. So if it's really important, just let me know. So anything right now, or should I explain these 5 Ds?
You're good for now.
Okay,
great.
cool.
Thank you.
I'm going a mile a minute. That costs
No, you're perfect. It's great.
Okay, good. Thank you. All right. So what do we do? What do we do if we see harassment happening? Now, this is if we're at the bus stop, we're walking to the grocery store. That's the only place I go. We're standing in line at the post office. The only other place I go. We're in the audience at a show, cross our fingers, right? Wherever it's happening, wherever we're seeing something happening that looks like harassment, that looks off. These are the things we can do. Direct, the first one. This is where you name the thing that's happening and you tell the person what you want them to do. So you say, hey, leave them alone. They obviously don't want to talk to you. Or, hey, that is very rude language. You need to get out of here. Or, hey, stop. That's harassment. They said they're not interested. Just whatever. It's short and sweet. You're not debating them. You're just saying, like, dude, knock it off. That's all you're doing. Dude, knock it off. The next D is distract. This works well if you maybe are afraid of any violence coming onto you, or if you don't feel like you have all the details of the situation, right? Because that definitely happens. So we can distract by just walking up. Sometimes we get physically in between these two people, right? Like, create that space to give the target a chance to get away. But we can ask for the time, or how late is this bus, or hey, cool shirt. Or do you know when the band goes on? Just whatever, just something to interrupt what's happening and give that target a chance to get away if, in fact, they need to get away. Because sometimes we misread a situation. Oh, sometimes we're worried. Oh, are they a couple? Do they know each other? Am I reading this wrong? Are they play fighting? Well, if you use distract and no one leaves and everyone looks at you like, okay, thank you, bye, then you say, cool, bye, and you get out of there. No big deal. And at least you now know everything's okay. And that's really worth checking. Delegate. Delegate, all it means is you ask somebody else for help. And the cool thing about this is that when you ask somebody else for help, one, they usually follow through. If you're really clear about what you need them to do, they will follow through. Two, you got someone else to help. That was you helping. You still helped out in this situation by getting someone else to do the thing that needs to be done. If I go to security and I say, hey, this guy over here, I mean, he is wasted. Like, he is going to hurt somebody, maybe himself. Can you handle this? I just helped that guy, and maybe even any potential victims of his grabby hands, right? And I don't need to get involved in that. That's not my job. So I got the person that made the most sense to take care of that situation just by delegating. Delayed. All this means is checking in after the fact. Sometimes things happen too quickly. We can't get to it in time. We don't really know if it was harassment or not. But the moment kind of passed, and now we just want to see, hey, is everything okay? So all this means is you check in with the person. You just ask them if they're okay, see if they need anything, and let them vent for a second. Let them feel seen, that what they just went through, they didn't go through it alone. Someone else saw it and understood that, like, yeah, it's kind of messed up. That person was really rude, right? It makes a huge difference. Studies show, research shows that when people do as little as give a knowing glance towards someone experiencing harassment, it can reduce that person's trauma around the event by half, 50%. So it's a big deal to just say, hey, are you okay? And if you learn nothing else, if you do nothing else that I say in this like 30 minutes, please, please, please at least promise me that you'll check in with someone that you think maybe was just harassed or at least just looks uncomfortable. And lastly, document. If there's an incident going on and it seems like it's really aggressive, and it's not safe for you to intervene, or if other people are already doing one of the other 5 Ds, then document. Get your phone out, start recording, and then give that footage to the target, to the victim, in case they want to use it for anything. It's not for you to share online and blow up their spot and have everyone say, oh, aren't you the lady that was harassed the other day? I saw that video. We're not doing that. We're just going to give it to the person who's affected in case they need it for any future use. It's up to them what happens. And so this is my very quick overview of the 5 Ds. But I'll tell you that my book, it goes over so much more than I could say in a half an hour. A lot of good stuff. It's basically the whole purpose of this book is to be just a no-nonsense, easy guide to making whatever space you inhabit a safer one. It talks about policies. It talks about what to do in the moment, how to respond to victims, what science you might want to know, so you know why victims respond in certain ways. It has a ton of stories and anecdotes and examples. It's got everything you need to get started in making your space safer space. And when I say space, I know we're talking about music, but that also means coffee shop. That means bookstore. That means your volunteer spot. It means your knitting group, like whatever space you're in, it really matters. And it makes a big difference for people. So now I'll do Q&A and I'll get the chat box up so I can see it myself and not rely on you guys. So yeah, if there's any questions at all about how to make a space safer, please, please, please put it in the chat. Let me know. And we'll go to the first question here. When you direct someone to leave and they contest that they were being harassed, is there a statement you can make that nukes their position but makes them think they're saving face by leaving? Yeah. So James, I assume that means that you get a complaint about someone, but then they say, no, I didn't do anything. I was being harassed.
Oh, I just mean if it's obvious, if it's necessary for them to leave and you're the person who is telling them to leave and they say, but I wasn't harassing, how do you prevent that from turning into a conversation rather than them just leaving?
Right. And so one of the tips is to just repeat the same thing over and over again to really not give it a chance to turn into a conversation. It's not a back and forth. It's not a debate. If that person needs to leave, then you just say, hey, you got to go. We got a complaint. You can't do that here. But blah, 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 blah. You got to go. We got a complaint and you have to leave. You got to go. We got a complaint. You have to leave. It's not forever, but you got to leave right now. Because it really isn't about kicking people out. That's not what Safer Spaces is about. It's not like keep kicking people out, sending them away, excluding people. It's about making sure that people that often experience harassment and violence just for being who they are able to enjoy that space as much as everybody else. And we don't want to, the goal is actually not to kick people out and get them out forever and ban them for life. the goal is for the bad behavior to stop. And if that can happen with a conversation or just like, hey, just so you know, like you can't do that here, right? That's simple. If it can happen with that, awesome. If someone's belligerent or if they're, if you're inebriated, you can't take that information in. I think we've all been there. I don't think that's rude to say. We're impaired. And so therefore any information maybe we're not going to take in. And so that's not the right time to have that conversation. And maybe that's okay, you got to leave, and no, it's not forever. You can come back anytime as long as you don't do that thing. Right. And so repeat yourself. Don't let it turn into a debate, and keep your cool. Even if they escalate, you stay calm and collected, same level the whole time. When you start to involve like another person or two, right? Like sometimes you want to grab a couple more people. So you're flanking them a little bit and you're like, okay, no, really, you got to go. That can escalate things as well. And so I would leave that more up to security, that it is a delicate dance. I'll say that. But if the more calm we can keep it and just say like, yeah, dude, I'm really sorry. You got to go right now. Here's your money back. Actually, here's your money back. Come back anytime. Just don't do that thing again. And as long as we keep it focused on the behavior and not the person, it's gonna make it easier for them to not be super defensive about it.
I have a question. It's a little bit more involved, so I didn't want to type it all out, but I want to ask if the way that I handled this was the correct way, or not necessarily the correct way. Well, I just want to tell you the story, and then we can talk about it.
Okay.
So it's something that traumatized me for a little bit. I was DJing at a downtown spot, and I happened to look to my left, and there was this person that I thought may have been throwing up. They were kind of hunched over against the door, wiggling around, and then I saw, whoa, there's someone that they're holding against the door. So I kind of kept my eye on it for a good 30 seconds to a minute, realizing that the person that was against the door was a woman. The guy on the other side was a man. The person on the other side was a man. And then I could see her trying to push him off. So I tap him on the shoulder and I'm like, hey, man, like, what's up with her? She falls into the booth. She's obviously out of her mind. Her eyes are rolling in the back of her head. And he kept trying to find the booth. I said, listen, a second, okay, please, just stay right there. And I looked down at her. I'm like, are you okay? She says, yeah, I'm fine. I'm trying to help her up. I'm like, no. I want to know if you're okay with him. Are you okay? And he kind of laughed. And she wasn't really in a place where she could speak, to be quite honest with you. And he pulled her into the bathroom, which was right next to my DJ booth. So door closes, bathroom. Oh, God, what's going on in there? I knock on the door, silence. Luckily, 2 seconds later, 2 female friends of mine come and I say, hey, listen, that's the women's room. Will you do me a favor? Will you bang on the door? And as women say, hey, we got to get in there. We got to use the bathroom really bad. And the guy screams, get the F away from the door. So now we're all kind of freaking out. And my friend goes, you know what? I'm getting security. And luckily, they went and got security. Security's like, I'm going to break the door down, open the freaking door. They open the door. She's on her knees. His pants are undone. I mean, it's a whole thing. And so, but I don't know if I could have acted faster. I think I was sort of frozen. But are there tools or tips that you can give me that I could have done or used that would have been more effective? Or was I okay in how I did it?
So let's talk about the fact that every situation we encounter where we think like, oh, is something wrong? Is this what's happening? Every situation we encounter is going to be this much different from the last. Right. And there's enough difference that it's natural that we might clam up. Right? Mm-hmm. Every situation is different. There's not some perfect thing I can say or do every single time, right? But if we use the 5 Ds as a framework, we lose so much of that stress of like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Right? We sort of focus our choices, and it makes it easier to find the right thing to do and to do it quicker. Right. And so let me talk about this. You were direct. Okay. You said, hey man, what's going on? What are you doing? Are you okay? You're being direct to both parties. You delegated to your friends to knock on the door and pretend to need to go to the bathroom. You can pretend to do something all you need to if you're trying to keep somebody safe, in my opinion, right? Then you delegated to security. Okay. Right. And then they were direct, knocking on that door, get the fuck out of here. Uh-huh. And so like, I think you did I think you did so many things right. And like, could you have done the first thing a little faster? Probably.
Right.
But maybe if you knew what the 5 Ds were before that incident, you'd go, okay, I know I can be direct. I am a man. I'm of a certain height. I'm in charge in the DJ booth. I feel comfortable being direct in this particular situation. Right.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that's the choice for you. And you might have gotten there a little sooner, but obviously it doesn't mean that violence never happens. It doesn't mean that there aren't jerks out there trying to ruin someone's good time or take advantage of someone. It's not about that, right? It's about what the rest of us can do to shut that behavior down before it gets real bad. And so I think everyone basically did their best. And the only other thing maybe that you could have done is, what are you going to do? Like, grab her arm and pull her into the booth and say, no,
right. Which
like
would have added more trauma.
Right.
That would have been more traumatizing for her because I didn't know the whole story. This could have been her boyfriend and she just may have gotten a little too drunk. I didn't know until I knew.
Yeah. Yes. And of course it's difficult for her to tell you, who this person is. And by the way, if anyone ever comes up across someone, who is that inebriated and you don't know if they know the person that they're with, you certainly have to try to figure it out. Try to ask, okay, well, what's their name? Right. Ask the sober person trying to drag the inebriated person away. What's her name?
Right.
Yeah. How long you known her? Where'd you meet her? Something like that. Just trip them up so that they think, well, this person's asking questions, so I'm going to get out of here, because that is a crime of opportunity. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so, ask, you can ask the victim, do you know this person? Do you feel comfortable with them? Are you okay? All of that stuff. Asking that woman if she's okay. Like, you did so many things right, and sometimes people are just total jerks.
Right, it's true.
And
so the
benefit. Well, let me say the benefit of creating safer spaces and making the need for them more clear and overt, and their presence known, and more people knowing the 5 Ds of bystander intervention. The benefit is the people that are currently willing to be that jerk, to take advantage of others. Well, we start to change the culture. We start to show that we're not going to let you get away with that anymore. And they start to rethink what is acceptable behavior. And it honestly, that bad behavior will happen less because people know that there are consequences for it, that they will be called out on it, that they will be met with resistance in some way, even if it's loving resistance of the 5 Ds, And so it will lessen violence. And in the meantime, the rest of us have to go ahead and say, hey, not okay, and interrupt that moment.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. And like, we've all come across a situation like that where we like think, what do we do? And that's why practicing these kinds of things really does help, especially if you're going to take on a safer space policy at an official space. You have some authority there. You don't want the first time you're talking to a victim to be the first time you've thought about, what should I actually be saying now? Like that's too late. Like, think about that stuff in advance. And it really does help. And I see another question. Is there a way to avoid disempowering a victim by taking over their voice? Like when you're the one confronting the harasser? Yeah. So let's say you want to be direct and say, hey, dude, knock it off. Right. So I always think like, you might not say this verbatim, but what I'm thinking in my head when I say something loud is, I have a problem with your behavior. I have a problem with that thing you just did to this other person. So we got a problem now, and so if I say like, dude, you can't say that, knock it off. Or that's transphobic. We don't allow that here. Especially if I work there, it's easier to say that's transphobic. We don't allow that here. You can't say that here. And if you keep it up, you're going to have to leave, that kind of thing. So that doesn't take away the victim's voice necessarily. That's saying like, you got a problem with me if you're going to talk like that. But if you're worried, if you're trying to come up with the right thing to say and it's just not coming out or you're worried about it, you can always just pivot to the victim and say, are you okay? Like, do you need me to talk to him, or do you need me to ask her to leave, or, like, just ask the victim directly what they need from you right now. And you can offer a couple choices if you want, appropriate for the situation. Sometimes when we tell a victim, what do you need right now? And leave it open-ended, it's like too overwhelming to think about what they actually need, because maybe they're just really upset and it's hard to think. So depending on the situation, you might be able to say, like, hey, do you want me to talk to that person, or do you want me to kick them out? Or maybe the moment's over and you say, like, hey, do you want to sit down next to me? I'm just going to be here, like, taking tickets. Like, you want to just sit down? Do you want some water? Yeah, I'd like to sit down. Okay, cool. And then it's a little less like, I have all the choices in the world. What do I choose? So just, not worst case scenario, but in the very least, you could always just say, like, are you good? What do you need from me? Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions? This is good stuff. Good conversation, guys. Thanks.
It's very good. Thank you so much for doing this. This is really informative.
Oh, I'm so glad.
And I'm really excited to read your book as well. I'm going to order a copy of that.
That's good. Yeah. So normally what I do is I train venues. When we do a safer space training, it can take up to 2 hours, right? Mm-hmm. We're talking about what it means to be a safer space. We're talking about what harassment looks like, because it looks different for everybody. And I can't memorize what every single bit of harassment looks like for everybody on the planet. It's not really about that. It's about looking for people that are uncomfortable, or just believing people when they say they've been harassed. We talk about grounding technique. We talk about the trauma in the brain, and sometimes victims freezing up or feeling like they have to be polite to get through a bad situation. We talk about what to say in the moment to a victim, what choices to give them. We talk about what to do after the fact. What if you know the person that's the harasser, or the person that was harassed? The secret is you do all the same stuff and you just talk to them later as a friend. But like when you represent a space, you got to make sure everybody in that space feels safe. Like, that's your responsibility. So we talk about a lot of stuff, and it takes 2 hours. And so I certainly do my best to boil it down for folks. But really, if we can just start thinking about victims, thinking about things in a victim-centered way, thinking about what constitutes a safer space, like, just keep it on our minds, and then be open and honest about it, and not be silent about it. Like, that's already going to get us a long way. If we never think or talk about harassment or what might happen if someone's harassed in our space, that doesn't mean it will never happen. Ignoring it doesn't make it go away. It is happening whether you think it's happening or not. And so, do you want to respond and actually keep folks around? Or do you want to just be surrounded in the end by a bunch of people that want to harass? Like, all the cool people that get harassed on the regular, like, they're going to leave. They're going to take their money somewhere else. So who do you want to hang out with? That's my question.
Excellent. Well, I'm on the board of an organization called Hopeworks that's here in Vermont, and we deal with sexual violence and sexual human trafficking. And we, at one point, had been doing bystander training when we had a different staff, and I think we've sort of fallen away, and we're trying to figure out how to do that again. And it'd be a great time now to start prepping for that before the bars open again. It sounds like this book is going to be very good for us.
Yeah, the book will be a great guide. I do plenty of trainings virtually. If anyone wants to hire me, I'm available.
Okay.
Now is definitely the time, because I really do fear that when we can all go back out and go have a drink in person, like, that it's like all hell's going to break loose, right? Like, we're going to be like, I don't know about you guys, but I leave the house so infrequently that I have forgotten how to make small talk. I don't know how to be polite as well. Like, I've lost the ability to just have little polite, oh, ha, 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 yeah, little conversations with the cashier. Like, I don't know how to do it. And so I feel like people are going to be sticking their foot in their mouth over and over. People are not going to feel safe. We're going to forget what our boundaries are and other people's boundaries, and so it could get a little wild when we all get back out there. So read this book and prepare for that is my push to everybody.
Awesome. Any more questions out there from folks before we wrap up?
Hey, Greg, it's Bob.
Hey, Bob.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, and Shawna, this is Bob from Big Heavy. We met in February when things were very different. So my question does kind of relate to what you were just talking about. Are there short statements that can be shared with people, I guess audience and bands that are about to come out to these places, that start this conversation without being a long policy that we expect a band coming to our thing for a half-hour show to read, but something short that tells them we don't tolerate harassment, or do we just say that? Is that short enough?
You could just say that. Like, the point of your policy really is that it's on your website somewhere for anyone to read at any time, right? So there's that. Also, you want protocols so that when someone is harassed, everyone on staff knows what to do and say. And so, but that's for you, right? Like those protocols are internal. And so if you want to go have a big long thing about your philosophy on anti-violence, that's cool. Put it on your website. It's there when people need it. Otherwise, you can just tell people, you can have it a link to it in the bottom of emails. And you can just say, like, we've got a policy, a safer space policy on our website, but basically no homophobic, racist, sexist, transphobic shit will be tolerated. No violence or hate. And if anyone bothers you, then XYZ. Then tell a manager, then tell security, like whatever your space's thing is, make it clear who do you talk to when it happens. And just make sure that those folks know what to do and say when someone actually reports, right? Research shows that when people, basically the idea is if we accidentally victim blame someone when they come to us and they trust us enough to tell us that they were just harassed, whether they use that exact wording or not. But if we accidentally victim blame them, which is easy to do in this society, we can re-traumatize them. We can actually make it worse. People really do experience a lot of trauma around identity-based harassment and violence, and it builds up over time. It doesn't disappear after each incident. And again, I put the science in my book for any skeptics that really need to hear that. But I lost my train of thought, but basically just tell people what you're about and who to tell, and you'll be good.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just say, I am so glad I got to visit your great state earlier this year when we didn't know what was coming down the pipeline. It was such a wonderful experience to meet everyone and hang out in your town. And I'm just so glad I got that little moment of travel before it wasn't an option anymore.
Right. Yeah. Was that your first time here?
Yeah, spending time. I think I've come through there on tour maybe once or twice, but you never see anything when you're on tour. So I really feel like I got to know the area, and it had snowed, and it was beautiful. And yeah, it was just, I really think back fondly on that time, because that's really the only time I traveled this year before all this stuff happened.
Yeah, I know.
It was the only time a lot of us did anything.
It's true. I know. I was in Puerto Rico in March recording a record, and before I went down I'd been down there for a week at a time, and everyone's telling me like, Greg, you sure you want to do this? Going to Puerto Rico right now? I'm like, no, I'm going. I'm doing this. I got to finish up this record. Blah blah blah. And I get there, and I'm in the airport in Miami, and people got masks on everywhere, and I'm like, wait a second. Something doesn't feel right. And I get to Old San Juan, 2 blocks away from where all the ships come in. Everyone at the hotel, they're in hazmat suits. And I'm like, oh, shit. Oh, boy.
Oh, this is real.
Yeah. So it was like studio, hotel, studio. That's it. Yeah, I was scared to death.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I'll just to put a fine point on it, even though most of us are only going to the grocery store, if that, harassment is still happening. Right now, harassment, especially against Asian communities, is at an all-time high. But in general, hate crimes are on the rise. And so even though we might have a chance to see it happening less because we're mostly indoors, it's still happening, and we can still do something about it. If you enact one of the 5 Ds, bystander intervention. When you see something go down at the grocery store, on the corner, whatever, you'll know what to do and say. You can keep that person safe and let them know that you have their back in really simple ways that keep you safe as well. And so, unfortunately, we should still be on the lookout for bad behavior, and we should try to make as many people as possible feel comfortable, because a lot of people, everyone has it tough right now, obviously, in so many ways. But the idea that some communities are facing extra harassment right now, it just seems like what a heavy weight for them to carry around. And so let's take some of that weight off and just say, nah, not in my neighborhood. Leave them alone. Go away.
Right. Well, there's a lot of folks that are, especially the haters, they're sitting around, stewing in their own stuff. So they only hear what they want to hear. They only see what they want to see. And their victims are unfortunately trapped because they have no place to go. There's no money. There's no job opportunities. So it's like this perfect storm to be the harasser. Yeah,
you're absolutely right. Tensions are at an all-time high. There's not a lot of healthy outlets for everything that we're feeling. Yeah, you're totally right. And so again, what does that mean? Everybody needs to be thinking about safer spaces and how we create safer spaces now, and how do we do it when we kind of get back and if things are a little more normal. But get it in place now. Start working on it now. Think about the world you want to live in now, and let's make it a reality.
I agree. So before we wrap up, I want to remind everyone that this is being recorded. It's going to be on YouTube for perpetuity. It's also going to be played on 105.9 FM, The Radiator, and BigHeavyWorld.com. So when that happens, how do folks get in touch with you to order books, to hire you, to come and speak, to ask questions, etc.?
Well, I just stopped sharing my screen. How silly of me. Okay, so
but
this
also
is
how. Also for the folks who are just listening via radio.
Okay, this is how. You can find everything you need to know at ShawnaPotter.com. It'll spell out everything, but Shawna Potter, that's Shawna with a W, Potter like Harry. You can buy my book, Making Spaces Safer, from akpress.org. I also have a new podcast out where I talk about the lyrics and the politics of my band's latest record. I'm in a band called War on Women. It's a feminist punk band. And so the podcast is called But Her Lyrics. And it's just something fun to do over the winter when I'm staying indoors, But people can hire me for trainings or like private, like feminist coaching, whatever you need right now that's related to safer spaces. I've got your back. Go to ShawnaPotter.com and find out how to get in touch with me.